Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Supatease back with another video, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through some self-commentary of Holy Paladin gameplay. If you don't know, the season is going to be ending pretty soon, within the next month, I would assume. So if you're interested in pushing for any PvP goals, if you want the mounts, if you want the tabards, the weapon enchants, or the 2000 rated transmogs, I'm going to be releasing some guides over the next couple of days on a couple of healers. So if you're interested in pushing on the healer role, which I suggest if you don't have any friends, which might sound a little bit cruel, but if you've just been playing the game on your own, you use LFG a lot to try and find teammates. Being a healer, you're going to find teammates a lot more easier that way. So I would highly suggest picking up a healer and getting good at it if you're struggling to find teammates. But here in this game, I'm playing Destruction Warlock Feral Druid Holy Paladin. It's a very aggressive, crowd control oriented composition. You play Repentance in this specific matchup, which I forget to change until literally the last second of the game. And we're facing a Holy Paladin Feral Druid Fire Mage, very similar composition, very aggressive, crowd controlled based team. So this game will end very quickly. It's all about you kind of positioning to avoid polymorph and get crowd control. I start the game by running it and trying to get the mage in combat. Because he waited to invis, I knew I could close the gap and get him before he could land a poly on me from stealth. And likely this team doesn't want to attack me, so I can just charge to the middle of the map and feel pretty safe. I try and start the fight with Hammer of Justice and into Repentance. I should have waited until my Warlock's Mortal Coils had connected before casting that, so I could avoid the interrupt. But regardless, my Warlock does a good job of capitalizing on me being interrupted to land a fear of his own. Here, my positioning, I'm not sure if it really could have been better. I tell my Feral to use his Trinket and Survival Instincts to trade out for the other Feral Druid's Incarnation, which even still isn't the best trade. I think in that position it may have been better to Trinket and Sacrifice. At the end, I use Blessing of Protection, Trinket, and Survival Instinct, so 3 cooldowns. It's not the end of the world, but I think it could have been a lot more clean if I had only used Sacrifice. After all the crowd control is over, I pop Avenging Wrath and try and snag a big heal using the Aura Mastery to avoid being interrupted. Now I see on Omnibar all interrupts are down, so I look to snag a Repentance on the Holy Paladin, unsuspecting in the middle of the map. My Warlock Times of Fear onto the Trinket afterwards. I need to dispel my Warlock out of Polymorph, obviously. If we have crowd control on the enemy healer, you want to get your teammates out of crowd control and doing as much damage as possible. I get kind of lucky here. The Mage Flame strikes me out of the blind. That blind crowd control chain could have forced a Divine Shield, so we're going to chalk that up to a bit of luck. Then I duck out of line of sight and I cast Tears Deliverance. This is a heal that basically turns you into a healing well. Anyone that's next to you gets healed for a bunch. So if you get it before you're crowd controlled, you're just a sheep that heals everyone around you. So I ducked out of line of sight, finished the Tears Deliverance, then walked back into line of sight to get polymorphed, told my teammate to go next to me to get healed by that healing well effect. Now that crowd control chain is over, I looked at Omnibar, there were no interrupts, so I just targeted the Paladin and went for a Repentance. As a Holy Paladin in this comp, you're almost playing like a mage healer. You need to be getting these Repentances onto the enemy healer for crowd control chains for your team. Here the team is setting up on me where they stun into a polymorph. It gets Mortal Coiled. I think the mage intended to polymorph me. Maybe I was still on DR at that point, so he polymorphed the Warlock. Either way, he ends up switching it to me. I'm saving Divine Shield to pair up with Divine Shield Sacrifice, Trinket Sacrifice. These are kind of your primary, oh my goodness, ways to survive. And because you have these basically immunities to damage, it lets you play really aggressive. Here's a bit of a miscommunication. My Feral was going for a stun and I was going to Repentance out of it, but unfortunately he auto-attacked and broke the Repentance, so a bit of a miscoordination there, and we could have gotten more cooldowns without that, so it's important to just stay communicated with your team in a crowd control oriented comp like this. Now I'm going to position at the top of the tomb, ducking in and out, looking for Repentance crowd control. The Feral Druid sees me going for that and stops me from getting it, and then the Mage looks to follow that up with a Polymorph. So now I'm looking at my defensives here. It's Divine Shield Sacrifice is my only real way out of big danger, and I'm just pacing the damage incoming on my Feral. I don't see any instant cast Pyroblast coming from the Mage, and he just got stunned, but I used Divine Shield to go for an aggressive play instead, getting a Repentance off of it while being immune to all interrupts, forcing a Divine Shield from the enemy's Holy Paladin. So I sacrificed some defense to get some offensive pressure, which is a risky move. I did not need to do it, but it does get us the same cooldown, basically Divine Shield. I opted to preemptively use Sacrifice, and I did it at a period of time where my Trinket was rotating back up available, so I'll still have the Trinket Sacrifice to get out of a situation such as potentially this. I'm in a full polymorph, so I use Trinket and Sacrifice, and again, this is a bit more aggressive play to go for a Repentance. Now I see the Mage and Ice block. he's immune to damage. He can't use counterspell and ice block, so he either cancels his immunity to damage to stop my crowd control, or he sits in the immunity and doesn't get healed and I land the crowd control. So it's a win-win for me to go for that risky repentance even in the face of the mage. And now I'm still just trying to keep my team out of polymorphs as much as possible. Avenging Wrath to start spam casting heals. They go for a stun polymorph chain. Now my aggressive plays earlier, this is where things become very scary. I've used Divine Shield Sacrifice and I've used Trinket Sacrifice. So those get out of jail free cards are no longer available. So I need to be very careful with coordinating with my team to say, hey, go bear form, get ready. But what I do have available is Tears Deliverance. So I cast Tears Deliverance before I expect to be crowd controlled. I basically turn into this healing well. Anyone standing next to me gets healed a bunch. Now with that up, I can safely go for crowd control. I also double check for interrupts, and this is again preemptive. I'm getting the cooldown rolling, then going for crowd control. In this position I have to, because I don't have sacrifice to fall on the back of later on. Now that I don't have Tears Deliverance, Trinket Sacrifice, or Divine Shield Sacrifice, I'm really in a tough spot. So this is probably the scariest moment of the game. We're a bit lucky. My Warlock is playing Imp and able to dispel me out of the polymorph, which gets me a little bit ahead there. But with Incarnation used, this is the enemy's team biggest damage cooldown, and if you look at my cooldowns, I've really got Divine Favor on my T key mind. That's an Aura Mastery immune to interrupts, and it's a very big heal, but it can be spell stolen, so you have to be very careful when you use it. You don't want the mage to just snag that off and interrupt you. So I'm only using instant cast healing while my Feral Druid's running across the pillar. When I'm out of line of sight, I go for the Divine Favor immunity to the Feral Druid's interrupt out of line of sight of spell steal to re-stabilize the Feral Druid, and it's a very risky call there. I don't think I really needed to use the Bestow Faith with the global cooldown before Divine Favor. I was expecting the mage to blink over the tomb. Then I went for the Divine Favor to make sure he wasn't in line of sight to poly me or to spell steal me. Now we're still in trouble. No sacrifice for 10 seconds. So I'm basically telling my Feral Druid to do whatever he needs to do to survive. So he's kiting away. He goes into bear form. And basically just do whatever you can to buy at least a couple seconds. I'm using only instant cast healing as there's counterspell available. And if I get snap interrupted, the game will easily just end. And I'm still telling my Feral Druid that I've got nothing. Just live a couple more seconds. I'm basically praying at this point that he survives. And he ends up surviving for me to get sacrificed. So it's a bit of a fluke that all ended up lining up the way that it did. And it can definitely get chaotic in games when you're playing aggressive as a healer and getting crowd control, but it's also a bit fun rather than just sitting back on the pillar doing nothing, trying to avoid crowd control. So I would say if you're going to go into this playstyle, you need to wholeheartedly go into it. Like, play aggro the whole time, commit to the strat, don't go half and half, because if you go half and half, you're not going to get anything done. Here my Warlock's doing a good job setting up crowd control. They're also setting up crowd control on me, but they could do a good job of interrupting it. So now I've got Avenging Wrath. I could use that to restabilize, but I see Polymorph being casted, and it's likely a Polymorph on me, so I don't want to pop Avenging Wrath and get crowd controlled on it. I'd rather wait, get crowd controlled. Now that because I don't have a sacrifice, I could Trinket that Poly if I chose to do so. Unfortunately for their team, they end up breaking the Polymorph. Still in this situation, I could use my Trinket. I'm waiting for the longest crowd control effect. At that point, it would be a stun or a blind, not a poly, because it was already at half DR, so I saved my trinket. Ended up being greedy. You still have to read the damage. Now the stun is the longest crowd control for 10 more seconds, so I get out of that immediately. Divine Favor heal. I go for Hammer of Justice. It's DR'd, but then I use Repentance while my Warlock cross crowd controlled with Mortal Coil. With all three players in crowd control, nobody can stop your Repentance, no one can stop your Chaos Bolt, and you're going to be landing a kill. So coordinating double Mortal Coil, Repentance on the healer, really good setup. Play aggressive as a Paladin. When you start falling behind on cooldowns more, particularly your Trinket Sacrifice, your Divine Shield Sacrifice, tell your teammates to play defensive, stay alive long enough for you to get out of crowd control and focus on breaking up crowd control chains. So I hope this kind of aggressive playstyle video is going to help you in the future on your Paladin endeavors. I'll see you guys in the next one.